I'm Lyra Montgomery, a white American judge who rose from Portland's St. John's slums, standing in a dazzling gala when a Wall Street titan sneered, "We don't need trash from the slums here." That crushing moment sparked one of the fiercest revenge stories you'll hear. I wasn't just a girl in a borrowed gown. I held evidence that could shatter an empire. This revenge story traces my fight to prove self-worth, exposing corporate corruption in a world that tried to break me. How did a slum kid turn humiliation into justice? Stay tuned to find out. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. Drop it in the comments. If you're hooked on revenge stories that inspire, smash that subscribe button and join us. My journey's just beginning, and it's one hell of a ride. I'm Lyra Montgomery, a 29-year-old white American woman, a judge who clawed her way out of the crumbling streets of St. John's, Portland, where hope was as scarce as sunlight in winter. My parents died in a car crash when I was 6, leaving me with Gran in a duplex that groaned under the weight of debt and despair. Her hands, rough from diner shifts, would knit through the night as she'd say, "Lyra, you're tougher than the nails holding this damn place together." Those words pushed me through law school on scholarships and grit, fighting a world that saw a poor kid and smirked. Now I wield a gavel in corporate litigation, but stepping into the Sentinel Hotel's ballroom, I felt like a trespasser. My borrowed sapphire gown a flimsy disguise. My palms, still calloused from teenage summers scrubbing pots, clutched a champagne flute like it could anchor me in this alien world. The ballroom was a goddamn spectacle, a cathedral of wealth with chandeliers dripping light like liquid gold onto polished marble floors. Portland's skyline gleamed through towering windows, the Willamette River a dark ribbon under the city's neon pulse. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved like shadows, offering trays of caviar and bubbly that cost more than my car. The crowd was a kaleidoscope of power, Asian tech moguls in tailored suits, black venture capitalists with diamond cufflinks, white Wall Street types with smiles sharp as knives. Their diversity was a thin veneer over their shared language of money, a dialect I'd never learned. I stood there, a white girl from the slums, my fair skin no shield against the weight of their stares. Gran had taught me to stand tall, but in this room, I felt like I was shrinking, my heart thudding like a trapped animal. David, my boyfriend, was my only lifeline. His hazel eyes caught mine, warm and steady as he leaned in. "You're stunning," he whispered, his hand brushing my lower back, sending a shiver through me. His tailored suit hugged his frame, every inch the son of Richard Carver, a Wall Street titan whose name could buy half this city. David had a way of making me feel seen, like my past. St. John's, the food stamps, the nights Gran and I ate cold beans by candlelight when the power was cut. Didn't matter. We'd met a year ago at a legal conference, his laugh cutting through the stuffy room like sunlight. He'd talk about art and justice, not just money, and I'd fallen hard, believing love could bridge our worlds. But here, surrounded by wealth that screamed excess, I wasn't so sure. The air was thick with perfume and ambition, each conversation a chess game of power. A woman in a sequined gown, her accent hinting at Shanghai, flicked her eyes over my gown, her smile not reaching her eyes. A black investor with a Rolex chuckled with David about some merger, his glance at me brief but cutting, like I was a curiosity, not a colleague. My stomach churned, a mix of dread and defiance. I'd faced hostile CEOs in court, dismantled their lies with a single question, but this room was a different beast. The sapphire gown, borrowed from a law school friend who swore it was gala-ready, felt like a costume, its silk too smooth for my rough hands. I took a sip of champagne, the bubbles sharp and foreign, trying to steady the tremor in my fingers. I'm a judge, I told myself. I've earned this. But the lie tasted bitter, like the cheap coffee Gran used to make. I thought of her, knitting under a flickering bulb, quizzing me on contract law while we shared a single plate of spaghetti. She'd worked herself raw to give me a shot, and I'd made it, judge at 29, a middle finger to everyone who'd ever sneered at our address. But this ballroom, with its gold-painted ceilings and murmurs of stock portfolios, felt like a planet I didn't know how to navigate. David was chatting with an Asian couple about crypto markets, his ease a stark contrast to my jangling nerves. I nodded along, pretending I followed, but my mind kept drifting to St. John's. where the air smelled of diesel and dreams died young. I'd fought so hard to escape that place, but here I felt like I'd never left. Then I saw him. Richard Carver strode through the crowd like a king claiming his throne, his silver hair catching the chandelier's light, his suit a silent scream of power. His blue eyes, cold as a January dawn, locked onto me, narrowing with a judgment that hit like a slap. It wasn't curiosity or warmth. It was a verdict. You don't belong here. My grip on the flute tightened, my knuckles pale against my fair skin. David, oblivious, leaned in. "Dad's intense, but he'll warm up," he said, his voice light, like it was no big deal. But Richard's gaze was a blade, cutting through the thin armor of my gown. I wanted to believe David, to trust that love could make me fit in this world of tycoons and private jets. But as the crowd's whispers sharpened, their eyes heavier, I felt the ground shift beneath me. Gran's words fought to rise. "Don't let anyone make you small." She taught me to claim my place, to fight for respect in a world that saw our poverty and turned away. But the chandelier's glow seemed to dim, the room closing in like a gilded cage. I took another sip, the champagne tasteless now, and forced my shoulders back. I was Lyra Montgomery, a judge who'd stared down liars in courtrooms. I'd earned my place, damn it. But Richard's predatory smile lingered, a challenge I couldn't ignore. The rain beat against the windows, Portland's pulse thrumming like my own, and I knew this night was a test. One I wasn't sure I could pass. Richard Carver's cold stare lingered like a blade at my throat. His predatory smile, a silent verdict that I didn't belong in his world. The Sentinel Hotel's ballroom pulsed with wealth, its chandeliers casting a golden haze over Portland's elite. But to me, it was a gauntlet. Each glance a test I was failing. I stood there, Lyra Montgomery, a white American judge from the slums of St. John's, my borrowed sapphire gown feeling more like a target than armor. The rain beat against the windows, Portland's restless pulse mirroring my own as I clung to David's hand, willing myself to believe I could fit in this glittering cage. Gran's voice echoed, "Don't let anyone make you small," but the weight of the crowd's eyes was crushing, their whispers sharp as glass. The ballroom buzzed with voices, a mix of accents and ambitions. Asian tech moguls discussing blockchain, black investors tossing around stock tips, white socialites laughing over flutes of champagne that cost more than my weekly grocery bill. I was a stranger here, a white girl from a place where dreams rusted like the abandoned cars in St. John's. David, my anchor, moved through the crowd with ease, his tailored suit and easy laugh blending seamlessly into their world. "You're doing fine," he murmured, his hazel eyes warm, his hand steady on my lower back. I forced a smile, my lips trembling under the strain. I wanted to believe him, to trust that love could bridge the gap between my past. Nights of canned soup and Gran's cracked hands, and this world of caviar and private jets. But every sidelong glance, every raised eyebrow, felt like a verdict. "You're out of place." I sipped my champagne, the bubbles sharp and unfamiliar, trying to steady the tremor in my hands. My palms, rough from teenage summers scrubbing dishes to help Gran pay rent, felt wrong against the smooth crystal. I'd fought so hard to escape St. John's, to become a judge at 29, a middle finger to everyone who'd sneered at our crumbling duplex. But here, surrounded by wealth that screamed excess, I was that kid again, the one who'd hidden behind Gran when the landlord banged on our door. I followed David to a cluster of guests, trying to keep up with their talk of mergers and offshore accounts. A woman with a diamond choker, her accent hinting at Hong Kong, gave me a thin smile, her eyes flicking over my gown like it was a thrift store find. A black man in a pinstripe suit chuckled at David's joke, his glance at me brief but dismissive, like I was a prop in their play. Then it happened. I reached for a fresh flute from a waiter's tray, my nerves making my fingers clumsy. A slick-haired white guy in a tux, his smirk sharp as a razor, accidentally bumped my elbow as he passed, muttering, "Careful, sweetheart, don't make a mess." The flute slipped, shattering on the marble floor with a crash that sliced through the ballroom's hum. The sound echoed like a gunshot, freezing every conversation. 300 pairs of eyes turned, pinning me like a specimen under glass. My cheeks burned, a flush creeping up my neck as I dropped to my knees, stammering, "I'm so sorry," my hands fumbling for the shards. The sapphire gown pooled around me, its silk catching the chandelier's light, exposing me further. Before I could stand, Richard Carver's voice boomed, cold and venomous. "Careful, sweetheart," he sneered, his silver hair glinting like a crown, his blue eyes glittering with malice. "We don't need trash from the slums mucking up our evening." The word trash hit like a fist, stealing my breath, reverberating off the gilded walls. The crowd's silence was deafening, their stares a mix of pity and amusement, like I was a street performer who'd botched the act. My heart splintered, each shard cutting deeper as I looked to David. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the floor, but he didn't say a goddamn thing. Not one fucking word. His silence was a betrayal sharper than Richard's insult, a knife twisting in my chest until I could barely breathe. I wanted to scream, to hurl the broken glass at Richard's smug face, to shout that I was a judge, not some nobody he could crush. But my throat locked up, my body moving on instinct. I stood smoothing my gown with trembling hands, forcing my chin up to meet the crowd's gaze. Their whispers followed. "Slum trash. Did you hear?" Like a swarm of hornets, stinging as I walked toward the ballroom's heavy doors. My heels clicked on the marble, each step a battle to keep my spine straight. The crowd parted, their eyes heavy with judgment, and I felt like I was walking through a gauntlet of scorn. Outside, Portland's rain slammed into me, cold and relentless, soaking through the gown as I stumbled into a taxi. The driver glanced back, his eyes soft with pity, but I barely saw him. I curled into the back seat, the city's neon lights blurring through the rain-streaked window like a nightmare. Gran's voice fought to surface. "You're tougher than nails, Lyra." She'd raised me to fight, to claim respect in a world that saw our poverty and turned away. But Richard's trash clung to me, sinking into my bones like the chill of our old duplex. David's silence replayed, his inaction louder than the gala's chatter. I'd believed he saw me, really saw me. Not the slum kid, not the scholarship girl, but me. Now, I wasn't sure. My hands clenched, nails biting into my palms, the pain a reminder I was still here, still alive. The taxi wound through Portland's wet streets, the rain's drumbeat matching my pulse. I stared at my reflection, sapphire gown, pale skin, a woman who dared to dream beyond her place. "You're not trash," I whispered, but the words tasted like ash, a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. The taxi's window was a cold mirror reflecting my pale face and the sapphire gown. Now a sodden weight, as I whispered, "You're not trash." The words tasted like ash, crumbling against the echo of Richard Carver's sneer, trash from the slums, and David's crushing silence. Portland's rain pounded the glass, the city's neon lights bleeding into streaks of red and gold, matching the storm in my chest. My nails dug into my palms, the pain a lifeline as Gran's voice fought to break through. "You're tougher than nails, Lyra." She'd raised me to stand tall in a world that saw our St. John's address and turned away. But that gala had stripped me bare, leaving me questioning everything. As the taxi wound through the wet streets, I clung to one truth. I wasn't done fighting. Richard's venom had lit a spark, and I'd be damned if I let it die. Monday morning, I hauled myself to my judge's chambers, the air thick with the scent of old books and burnt coffee, a refuge from the gala's humiliation. My desk was a fortress of case files, a barrier against the memory of 300 pairs of eyes, and Richard's vicious grin. I was Lyra Montgomery, a white American woman who'd clawed her way from St. John's broken sidewalks to a courtroom gavel, but that night had made me feel like the kid hiding behind Gran when the landlord came knocking. I threw myself into work, desperate to bury the shame. A shareholder dispute for Carver Capital, Richard's financial empire, sat at the top of my stack. It was supposed to be a dry argument over stock valuations, but as I sifted through the documents under the dim glow of my desk lamp, a chill ran through me. Something was off, way off. The numbers didn't add up. Shell companies with names like ghost ships, stock spikes tied to no public news, transactions buried in a maze of corporate jargon. My pulse quickened, a flicker of defiance cutting through the fog of self-doubt. This wasn't just sloppy bookkeeping. It was a fucking crime scene, and Richard's name was scrawled all over it. I leaned back in my creaky chair, Portland's skyline shimmering through the rain-streaked window, casting jagged shadows across the room. A month ago, a nervous paralegal, a young black woman with eyes that darted like she was being watched, had slipped me a USB drive at a diner. "Carver's books are dirty," she'd whispered, her voice barely audible. "Dig deep." I'd stashed it in my desk, too swamped to look, but now I plugged it in, my heart hammering like I was breaking into a vault. Files spilled across my screen, ledgers, memos, emails. One caught my eye, a trail of millions funneled through a Cayman Islands account, timed with a Carver Capital stock surge. My breath caught, my fingers freezing on the keyboard. This was insider trading, market manipulation, the kind of shit that could send a titan like Richard to prison. I cross-referenced the USB's data with court filings, my hands moving on autopilot, the clock ticking past 1 a.m. Every click felt like stepping onto a tightrope. As a judge, I was supposed to oversee, not investigate, but the evidence was screaming, and I couldn't look away. To avoid conflict of interest, I'd need to hand this to the SEC and my lawyer, but first, I had to be sure. Richard's voice echoed, "We don't need trash mucking up our evening," and I gritted my teeth. If he thought I was nothing, I'd show him what nothing could do. By 3 a.m., I found the jackpot. An email from Richard to his CFO, blunt and damning. Push the funds through before the SEC catches wind. Leak the merger rumor to juice the stock. My hands shook as I saved the file, the screen's glow burning my eyes. This wasn't just evidence, it was a guillotine, sharp enough to cut through Richard's empire. He wasn't just a cruel bastard. He was a criminal, rigging markets, while people like Gran lost their savings to men like him. I thought of her, knitting under a flickering bulb, her cracked hands teaching me to fight for what's right, even when it scares you shitless. Pursuing this could end my career, my relationship with David, maybe even my safety. Richard wasn't the type to go down quietly. Men like him played dirty, with lawyers and threats sharper than knives. But as I stared at that email, his signature glaring like a middle finger, a fire ignited in my chest. Fear clawed at me, whispering all the ways this could go wrong. What if David hated me? What if I lost everything? But Gran's voice drowned it out. "Don't let anyone make you small." I wasn't just fighting for me, I was fighting for everyone Richard had crushed, every family who'd lost to his greed. I saved every file, locked the USB in my desk, and stood, my shadow long against the wall. Portland's rain pounded outside, a rhythm that felt like a war drum. I whispered to the empty room, "You fucked with the wrong girl, Richard." For the first time since the gala, I felt alive. Not trash, but a fighter with a weapon in her hands. I'd pass this to my lawyer and the SEC tomorrow, but tonight I was Lyra Montgomery, and I was ready to strike. The click of the drawer locking the USB echoed like a vow in my chambers, sealing my resolve to bring Richard Carver down. I stood there, my shadow stretching across the wall, Portland's rain hammering the window as I whispered, "You fucked with the wrong girl, Richard." The words burned, fueled by the rage that had replaced the shame of the gala. Richard's sneer, trash from the slums, and David's silence had cut deep. But that email, his own words ordering market manipulation, was a weapon in my hands. I was Lyra Montgomery, a white American woman who'd fought from St. John's broken streets to a judge's gavel, and I wasn't about to let a Wall Street titan walk free. But as Portland's neon skyline flickered through the drizzle, a heavier truth settled in my chest. David. I loved him, damn it. And this could shatter us. His betrayal at the gala still stung, but hiding this from him felt like a betrayal of my own. I couldn't wait. That evening, I drove to David's downtown loft, the Willamette River glinting like a fractured dream under the city's lights. My hands trembled as I clutched the printed emails, their edges creased from my grip. His loft was a world of sleek glass and polished wood, a far cry from the sagging duplex where Gran raised me. David opened the door, his hazel eyes softening for a split second before narrowing at the storm in my face. "Lyra, what's going on?" he asked, stepping aside. The air carried his cologne and the faint warmth of a candle, a cruel reminder of nights we'd spent here, laughing over takeout, dreaming of a life together. Now, those dreams felt like ghosts. I didn't sit. I couldn't. I slid the emails across his glass coffee table, my voice steady despite the knot in my throat. Your dad's rigging the market, David. Insider trading, fake mergers. He's been cheating people for years. The words spilled out, sharp and raw, like the broken glass from the gala. David's face tightened, his jaw clenching as he scanned the pages. This is bullshit, he snapped, shoving them back. You're doing this to get back at him for the gala. You're trying to burn my family down. His accusation hit like a slap, stealing my breath. I'd braced for doubt, but not this. Not him thinking I'd twist justice into revenge. My heart cracked. The pain as raw as when he'd stood silent while his father called me trash. I'm a judge, I said, my voice breaking. I found this in court files, David. Not some vendetta. Millions in dirty money, shell companies, your dad's signature on every damn order. I jabbed a finger at the email, my hand shaking. He stood pacing to the window, the river's shimmer casting shadows across his face. You don't get it, Lyra, he said, his voice low and bitter. This is my family, my legacy. You think you can just blow it up and we'll be okay? His words cut deeper than Richard's sneer, each one a reminder of the chasm between us. His world of wealth, mine of struggle. I wanted to scream that this wasn't about us, that I'd stumbled onto the truth while reviewing a case, that I'd already contacted my lawyer to hand this to the SEC to stay clean. But his distrust, his anger, felt like a second betrayal, sharper than the first. David, I can't ignore this, I said, my voice barely holding. People like Gran lost everything to men like your dad. I'm doing this for them, not to hurt you. My chest tightened, memories flooding back, Gran's cracked hands, our candlelit dinners when the power was cut, her lessons about standing for what's right. He turned, his eyes hard, almost unrecognizable. Then choose, he said, his voice cold as the rain outside. Push this, and we're done. The ultimatum hung like a guillotine, slicing through the last threads of hope. My vision blurred, not from tears, I'd be damned if I cried, but from the weight of losing him. I loved David, loved the way he'd made me feel like I was enough, slum kid or not. Now he was asking me to choose between that love and my soul. I grabbed the emails, my hands trembling, and headed for the door. I'm not doing this to hurt you, I whispered, my voice cracking. But I can't bury the truth, not even for you. The door slammed behind me, the sound echoing like a gavel in my mind. I stumbled into my car, the rain pounding the windshield like a drumbeat of regret. Portland's streets blurred past, the city's lights smearing into streaks of color. Alone, I felt the weight of my choice crash down. I was risking everything, David, my career, maybe even my safety. Richard wasn't the type to let a slum kid challenge him without a fight, and his world had teeth. But Gran's voice cut through. Don't let anyone make you small. She'd fought for me when the world didn't care, and now I was fighting for something bigger than myself. I pulled over under a flickering street lamp, the rain's rhythm steadying my pulse. My lawyer would get the evidence to the SEC tomorrow. Clean, by the book, no conflict of interest. But tonight, I was alone with my choice. David's face flashed in my mind, his hazel eyes soft under the Willamette's bridges, now hard with anger. Had I lost him for good? The thought was a knife, twisting deep. But as I gripped the wheel, resolve hardened like steel. I wasn't just Lyra Montgomery, the white girl from St. John's. I was a fighter, and this fight was just beginning. The door of David's loft slammed behind me, its echo swallowed by the relentless rain pounding Portland's streets. His ultimatum, push this and we're done, cut deeper than Richard's sneer, a fresh wound bleeding into the shame of the gala. I drove through the city, the Willamette's dark shimmer a blur through my windshield, my hands gripping the wheel like it could hold me together. I was Lyra Montgomery, a white American woman who'd fought from St. John's slums to a judge's gavel, but tonight I felt like I was losing everything. Gran's voice pushed through the haze. Don't let anyone make you small. I'd told David I couldn't bury the truth, and as the city's neon lights smeared past, I meant it. Under a flickering street lamp, I'd called my lawyer, my voice steady despite the tremor in my gut. Get this to the SEC, I said, the Carver Capital evidence burning a hole in my bag. The fuse was lit, and there was no turning back. The SEC moved like a goddamn hurricane. By Friday, headlines blazed across every screen. Carver Capital rocked by insider trading scandal. Richard's empire hemorrhaged 25% of its stock value overnight. A financial bloodbath that left Wall Street reeling. His face, once smug under the Sentinel Hotel's chandeliers, stared grimly from news channels, his silver hair stark against a backdrop of courtroom sketches. I'd resigned as a judge days earlier, the conflict of interest too glaring to ignore. A clean break to ensure my testimony couldn't be challenged. Now I stood in a Portland courtroom as a witness, not a judge, my heart hammering as I faced the oak-paneled walls and a jury of strangers. The air was thick with tension, the jurors' eyes wide, their pencils scratching like a countdown to justice. I laid out the evidence, emails, transaction logs, the whistleblower's USB, my voice steady, each word a brick in the case against Richard Carver. I wasn't the trembling girl in the sapphire gown anymore, the one who'd fled the gala under Richard's trash sneer. I was Lyra Montgomery, a white woman from the slums who dared to challenge a titan. The courtroom felt like a stage, the weight of my words shifting the air. I spoke of shell companies, fake merger rumors, millions funneled through offshore accounts, all tied to Richard's signature. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed Latina who'd thanked me quietly before the hearing, nodded as I finished. The jury leaned forward, one man scribbling furiously, another, a black woman with a skeptical frown, locking eyes with me. I held her gaze, channeling Grand's unyielding strength. This wasn't just about me. It was for every family Richard's greed had crushed, every St. John's kid who'd lost hope to men like him. But the victory wasn't clean. My inbox was a war zone, flooded with anonymous threats. "You're dead, bitch. Drop it or regret it." One night, I found my car's tires slashed outside my apartment, the jagged cuts glinting under a street lamp like a predator's teeth. My pulse raced, fear clawing at my chest as I stood in the drizzle, Portland's skyline looming like a silent judge. Then Richard called, his voice a low growl through my phone. "You'll pay for this, you little nobody," he spat, each word dripping venom. I hung up, my hands shaking, but rage burned hotter than fear. Trash? I'd just shaken his world to its core. I forwarded his voicemail to my lawyer, my fingers steady now. "Try me, asshole," I muttered, saving the file. The SEC had everything, my evidence, the whistleblower's data, and now Richard's own threats. The media frenzy was relentless. Reporters swarmed my apartment, their cameras flashing like vultures circling a kill. Lyra Montgomery, the judge who took down Carver Capital, one headline read. But others were uglier. Vindictive slum girl targets tycoon. Each jab stung, a reminder of the gala's whispers, but I kept my head down, dodging their questions. Social media was a split verdict. Some called me a hero, others a gold digger out to ruin a great man. I scrolled through the comments late at night, the glow of my phone harsh against the dark, and felt the weight of the world's judgment. Grand's voice anchored me, "You're tougher than nails." She'd fought for me when St. John's offered nothing but despair. And now I was fighting for others, for justice bigger than myself. David hadn't called. His silence was a void, deeper than any threat. A wound that throbbed with every memory of his laugh, his touch under the Willamette's bridges. I'd see his face in my dreams, his hazel eyes soft, and wake with an ache I couldn't shake. Had I lost him for good? The thought was a knife, twisting in the quiet moments. I stood at my apartment window, Portland's gray skyline stretching beyond the rain, and felt the victory's bitter edge. I'd unmasked Richard, sent his empire crashing, but at what cost? My reflection in the glass was older, harder, a white woman from the slums who'd landed a blow but paid a price. Pride swelled in me. I'd stood up to a titan, done what was right, but without David it felt hollow. The rain's rhythm echoed my pulse, and I braced myself for what came next, knowing this fight was only the beginning. The rain streaked down my apartment window, Portland's gray skyline a blur as I stood there, the weight of my small victory against Richard Carver settling like dust. I'd unmasked a Wall Street titan, sent his empire crashing, but the cost was a hollow ache in my chest. David's silence, first at the gala, then his ultimatum, cut deeper than the anonymous threats or slashed tires. I was Lyra Montgomery, a white American woman who'd fought from St. John's slums to a judge's gavel. But the fight had left me raw, staring at my reflection in the glass, wondering if I'd lost the man I loved. Gran's voice whispered through the drizzle. "You're tougher than nails, Lyra." I'd landed a blow, but the war wasn't over. As the city's neon lights pulsed faintly, I braced myself for what came next, hoping I hadn't burned every bridge to ash. 3 weeks later, a knock at my door jolted me from my thoughts. I opened it to find David standing there, his dark hair a mess, his hazel eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept since our fight. My heart lurched, caught between hope and hurt. "I fucked up," he said, his voice breaking, barely audible over the rain outside. "I went through Dad's files, offshore accounts, fake trades, shit even you didn't find. I'm giving it to the SEC." He held out a flash drive, his fingers grazing mine as I took it, a spark of warmth piercing the cold void of his absence. I wanted to yell, to throw his betrayal, his silence, his doubt, back in his face, but the pain in his eyes stopped me. It was the same pain I'd felt when Gran died, leaving me alone in that crumbling duplex. I stepped aside, letting him in, the air heavy with rain and unspoken wounds. We sat on my threadbare couch, the city's hum faint through the window, its lights casting soft shadows across the room. "I was raised to think he was a god," David said, staring at his hands, his voice thick with shame. "I didn't want to believe he'd do this." His admission cracked something open, a raw honesty that mirrored my own. "I should have told you sooner," I said, my throat tight. "I hid it because I was scared of losing you." The words hung between us, jagged but true, like pieces of a broken mirror we could start to mend. We talked until the sky lightened, peeling back layers of hurt. His fear of losing his family's legacy, my dread of being the trash his father named me. Each confession was a stitch, painful but healing, pulling us back together. I'd resigned as a judge before testifying. The conflict of interest, a neon sign I couldn't ignore. Handing the evidence to my lawyer in the SEC had been the right call, keeping my hands clean, but it left me untethered, my gavel gone. Instead of sinking, I found a new anchor. The system I'd served often failed people like Gran, poor, powerless, left behind. So I started Justice Access, a nonprofit to help those the law overlooked. Mexican immigrants facing deportation, Black families fighting predatory landlords, Asian workers cheated out of wages. My first case was a Guatemalan single mom, her eyes wide with fear as we sat in my makeshift office, a folding table cluttered with legal pads. Winning her case, keeping her kids in their home, felt like a spark igniting a fire. It wasn't just a win, it was redemption, a way to honor Gran's fight, her cracked hands knitting hope into my bones. David didn't try to fix me with his money or name. Instead, he poured his trust fund into Justice Access, not as a savior, but as a partner who saw my vision. We'd walk along the Willamette at dusk, the river's surface rippling under Portland's lights, talking about the cases, the people we helped. One night, as the skyline glowed, he took my hand, his grip steady. "I was wrong, Lyra," he said, his voice low but sure. "You're the strongest person I've ever known." His words were a lifeline, pulling me from the loneliness that had haunted me since the gala. I squeezed his hand, feeling hope flicker like a candle in the dark. We weren't the same people, his faith in his father shattered, my insecurities laid bare, but we were rebuilding, brick by honest brick. The threats kept coming, venomous emails landing like punches. "You'll regret this, slut." I'd wake to my own heartbeat, half expecting a brick through my window. But each case we won dulled the fear. Justice Access was my rebellion, a middle finger to Richard's trash sneer and every system that crushed the powerless. I thought of Gran, her lessons about standing tall when the world tries to bury you. Portland's rain softened to a mist, the city's pulse sinking with mine. I was no longer the girl who'd fled the gala, head bowed under a sea of stares. I was Lyra Montgomery, a white woman from the slums, building something real. David and I had a long road ahead, but as we stood by the river, hand in hand. I knew we could face it together, stronger for it. The Willamette River gleamed under Portland's dusk, its ripples catching the city's lights as David and I walked hand in hand. His words, "You're the strongest person I've ever known," warming me against the evening's chill. Justice Access was thriving. David was by my side, and for the first time since the gala's humiliation, I felt like I was building something real. But the scars lingered: Richard's sneer, David's initial betrayal, the threats that had haunted my nights. I was Lyra Montgomery, a white American woman who'd clawed her way from St. John's slums to a judge's gavel, then traded it for a fight bigger than myself. Gran's voice echoed through the mist. "You're tougher than nails, Lyra." As the river's breeze brushed my face, I felt a quiet strength, a certainty that I wasn't just surviving, I was ready to claim my worth, no matter what came next. 2 years later, I stood on a TEDx stage in Portland, the spotlight searing my skin, the theater packed with faces, young, old, Black, Asian, Latino, white, staring up at me. Justice Access had become a lifeline, helping hundreds: Mexican immigrants fighting deportation, Black families battling slumlords, Asian workers cheated out of wages, white single moms like the ones Gran used to know, scraping by in places like St. John's. We'd won cases that gave kids their homes back, restored dignity to the powerless, and proved the system could bend for those it usually broke. Richard Carver was a fading headline, convicted on fraud and insider trading charges, his empire gutted, sold off like junk at a yard sale. His face, once smug under the Sentinel Hotel's chandeliers, was now a grainy mugshot, his silver hair stark against prison orange. I'd done that. Me, the slum kid he'd called trash. The stage's wooden floor creaked under my heels as I gripped the mic, my voice steady despite the butterflies clawing my gut. "They called me trash," I said, letting the words hang, the audience leaning in, a sea of eyes reflecting the spotlight. But I proved I'm a fucking diamond. A wave of gasps and cheers broke the silence, and I grinned, feeling the weight of that gala night lift. I told my story: the crash of the champagne flute, Richard's venomous sneer, David's silence that cut deeper than any insult. I spoke of Gran, her hands cracked from diner shifts, knitting hope into my bones as we ate by candlelight in our crumbling duplex. I shared how I'd uncovered Richard's crimes, handed them to the SEC through my lawyer, and resigned as a judge to testify clean. The crowd hung on every word, some nodding, others wiping tears. A Black woman in the front row, clutching her purse like it was a lifeline. I wasn't just Lyra Montgomery, the ex-judge or the whistleblower. I was a voice for everyone who'd been called less than, the immigrants, the workers, the families the world ignored. Justice Access wasn't just a nonprofit. It was my rebellion, a middle finger to Richard's sneer and every system that crushed the powerless. I testified before Congress on corporate oversight, my voice no longer shaking, and turned down cushy law firm jobs. I didn't need their glass towers. My purpose was here, in the stories of people like Gran, like the Guatemalan mom whose kids could sleep safely because we'd fought for her. David and I had settled into a modest apartment overlooking the Willamette, no penthouses or private jets. Just us, building a life on truth. He'd left Carver Capital's wreckage, pouring his energy into Justice Access, securing grants for our work. Our love wasn't perfect. The scars of his doubt lingered, but we'd rebuilt it, honest and raw. Late at night, we'd sit on our balcony, the river's shimmer a quiet witness to our talks, about his father's fall, my fear of being unworthy, our shared dream of a world less cruel. "You didn't just save me," he'd said one night, his hazel eyes soft. "You showed me what matters." I'd leaned into him, feeling the warmth of a bond forged in fire. The threats had dwindled, though my inbox still caught the occasional "you'll pay, bitch" from Richard's diehards. I'd learned to let them slide, each one a badge of how far I'd come. Justice Access was my answer to the gala, to the world that tried to break me. Every case we won, every family saved, every voice heard, was a defiance of Richard's trash label. Portland's skyline stretched beyond the theater, its lights a testament to the city that had shaped me. I stepped off the stage, the applause a thunderous wave, carrying me back to St. John's, to Grand's duplex, where we'd eaten soup by candlelight. She'd always said the world would try to bury me, but I could rise stronger. Your worth isn't your past or the names they sling at you. It's in how you fight, how you stand when the world tries to crush you. Even when the person you love doubts you, you can find the light within. I did. I was Lyra Montgomery, a white woman from the slums, and I'd toppled a titan. If I could, anyone could. As the crowd's cheers faded, I knew this wasn't the end. It was a beginning, a promise to keep fighting for those who'd been called trash and dared to shine. Your value isn't defined by where you come from or the insults thrown your way. Resilience is turning pain into strength, and even after betrayal, you can find the light within. Keep fighting. You're tougher than you know. That's my story, how a St. John's slum kid took on a Wall Street giant and found her worth. From being called trash to building justice access, I learned resilience is forged in fire. What's your story? How have you stood up when someone tried to tear you down? Share it in the comments. I'm all ears. Thanks for joining me on this wild ride. Your support means everything. Hit subscribe for more revenge stories that spark hope. And let's meet again soon for another tale of fighting back. Stay fierce.